Shrimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Rupa Vishram Shrimad Ashtarasata Shrimad Srila Bhakti Vigyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Rupa Vishram Vishnupad Ashtarasata Shrimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Rupa Vishra Bhagavan Srila Bhakshivas Prabhuji Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Rupa Vishra Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitya Rupa Vishra Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadash Raghunath Shara Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Nama Jai Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जाय। सर्व विश्व विराट गिरिराज महाराज की जाय। श्री राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज की जाय। श्री मन देवी गंगा देवी की जाय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जाय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जाय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाय की जाय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जाय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। हरि बोल। ऐसे श्री माता जी राधे राधे कालराज। Alright, just sharing my screen. Here we go. Hari Bol, Pajumna Prabhu. Okay, so this is what we read. Yes, no, I'm just gonna read the summary of this first chapter, of this 32nd chapter. So Kapila Dev, he talks about attached workers, the practitioners of sakam karma. That means fruit of activities, wanting to enjoy the results of your activities. So those people cannot attain liberation. A grihamedi, an attached worker, performs dharma for enjoying artha and kam, and after enjoying them, he acts the same way again and again. Such person is averse to bhakti, but worships the devatas and pitris with full faith. As a result, he is elevated to the moon, where he drinks soma juice and then returns back to earth. All the planets attained by such a grihamedi are destroyed when he goes to his bed of serpents, Anatashesh. And at the end of the day of Brahma, all the planets are attained by such a grihamedi. All that is attained. I'm so tired. I'm sorry. I've been up all night. All the planets attained by such a grihamedi are destroyed when the Lord goes back to his bed of serpents, Anatashesh, at the end of the day of Brahma. Okay, detached workers, practitioners of nishkam karma. They can attain the Lord. And nishkam karma yoga means the opposite of sakam karma yoga. This means that they perform their activities, their duties in this world without any desire to enjoy their fruits. They offer all the results of their activities to the Lord. But more intelligent people execute swadharma with detachment, nisanga nivritti dharma, and do not desire the fruits of their actions, but offer them to the Lord. They are peaceful and pure in consciousness, without a sense of proprietorship or false egoism. Such people travel through the path of the sun and attain the Lord. And now is the destination of the Hiranyagarbha worshippers and superiority of bhakti. The Hiranyagarbha worshippers remain in the material world, Satyaloka, till the end of Brahma's lifetime, when Brahma gives up his body and goes to the Lord, when he enters into Mahavishnu. Those detached yogis, by the practice of breathing exercises, etc., they reach Brahma's planet. After giving up their bodies, they enter the body of Brahma and get liberated along with Brahma. Then there's two notes here. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that if the Hiranyagarbha worshippers worship only Brahma, but do not have bhakti for Lord Vishnu, they will not attain liberation at the end of Brahma's life. They merge into the body of Mahavishnu along with Brahma. But when the universes are created again, they enter into the universe. And another note, although Brahma becomes liberated, he cannot liberate his devotees. Only the Supreme Lord can liberate one from the clutches of Maya. Since without bhakti no one can become liberated, better perform bhakti. Therefore, O mother, take direct shelter of the Lord, who is seated in everyone's heart. Even Brahma, the Kumaras, and other exalted personalities don't get liberated if they have bhed drishti, independent vision or mentality of being doers and being independent of the Supreme Lord. Though they attain Mahavishnu, they will come back in their same forms and positions in the next creation. So it's not even necessarily that Brahma will attain liberation if he has bhed drishti, the mentality of being the doer, being independent of the Supreme Lord. Because of their absence of bhakti, Brahma and others return to the place where people perform sakam karma. Okay. Now Lord Kapila criticizes sakam karma. With their minds attached to this world, the materialistic people perfectly perform their prescribed duties with attachments to fruitive results. Tormented by passion and with their minds absorbed in household affairs, they worship the forefathers. They are interested only in dharma, artha, and kam, and averse to harikatha, and thus they are compared to stool-eating hogs who are attached to asadgata. Sorry. What's gata mean? I forgot. Anyways. Perfectly performing their prescribed duties from birth until death, they go to Pitriloka. After the pious credits are exhausted, they fall back down to earth. And now, we read up to 26 yesterday, right? Yeah, okay. So, therefore, with full attention, you should worship the Lord, whose attractive lotus feet are worth worshipping. Accept this with all devotion and love. Bhakti unto Lord Vasudeva makes one advance in knowledge and detachment, as well as in self-realization. Oh yeah, that's the very important verse. So that in this verse, it's showing that all the other, even in order to, every practice is dependent on bhakti yoga, even to get jnāna or any path. But bhakti is fully independent. Bhakti doesn't depend on any other path. It's fully independent. But every other path is dependent on bhakti to attain the result. So symptoms of such a devotee. Devotees equipoised in sensory activities and vision, transcendental to good and bad, superior and inferior. By his intelligence, he sees himself uncontaminated by matter. And the devotee is elevated to the transcendental platform, equal in qualities with the Lord. And in verse 22-23, Kapila said that all the results of bhakti, jnāna, and yoga are achieved by performing bhakti alone. How is that? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavān, is one, but he appears differently as Brahman, Paramatma, or Purush Avatar, according to the different processes followed by various practitioners. Note, because Bhagavān contains both Brahma and Paramatma, the realization of Bhagavān by bhakti includes the realizations of Paramatma and Brahman. On the other hand, by practicing jnāna for Brahman or yoga for Paramatma, one does not attain the position of an associate of the Lord, for this is nowhere stated in the scriptures. So now we're going to read about jnāna. Lord Kapila speaks on jnāna. Okay, and we'll do the Mangala Chant really quick before we start. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Namo Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Narayana Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tara Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Prabhajantam Anupetam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tanmayataya Taravo Bhinetu Stang Sarva Bhuta Hridaya Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritam Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Shinvatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridantastoya Bhadrani Vedunoti Suritsatam Nashta Prayeshvavadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavai Vasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Kshiptastakama Titarangamate Kripa Maitam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. All right. Dandavat pranam Zindira Mataji. Okay, so sorry for that was a very long introduction or recap. I just read everything, but let's begin. And we might not be able to get to the end of this chapter because this chapter is actually, there's quite a bit left. Well, there's 6,000 words to read, and we've been reading about 5,000 words every day. So we'll see. Hey. Yeah, wait, I'm just checking. Which verse did we read up to yesterday? We read up to 27. Okay. Okay. Etavaneva yogena samagrene hayogina yujate bhimato yarto yara sangastu kritsnasha. The greatest common understanding for all yogis is complete detachment from matter, which can be achieved by different kinds of yoga. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are three kinds of yoga, namely Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga. Devotees, Jnanis, and Yogis all try to get out of the material entanglement. The Jnanis try to detach their sensual activities from material engagement. The Jnana Yogi thinks that matter is false and that Brahma is truth. He tries, therefore, by cultivation of knowledge, to detach the senses from material enjoyment. The Ashtanga Yogis also try to control the senses. The devotees, however, try to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Therefore, it appears that the activities of the bhaktas, devotees, are better than those of the jnanis and yogis. The mystic yogis simply try to control the senses by practicing the 8 divisions of yoga, yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahara, etc. And the jnanis try by mental reasoning to understand that sense enjoyment is false. But the easiest and most direct process is to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. The purpose of all yoga is to detach one's sense activities from this material world. The final aims, however, are different. The jnani wants to become one with the Brahman effulgence. Yogis want to realize Paramatma. And devotees want to develop Krishna consciousness and transcendental loving service to the Lord. That loving service is the perfect stage of sense control. The senses are actually active symptoms of life, and they cannot be stopped. They can be detached only if there is superior engagement. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, param drishtva nivartate. The activities of the senses can be stopped if they are given superior engagements. The supreme engagement is the engagement of the senses in the service of the Lord. That is the purpose of all yoga. Jnanamekam parachinar indriyar brahmanir gunam avabhatartarupena bhrantya shabdani dharmina. Those who are averse to the transcendence realize the supreme absolute truth differently, through speculative sense perception. And therefore, because of mistaken speculation, everything appears to them to be relative. Purport. The supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is one, and he is spread everywhere by his impersonal feature. This is clearly expressed in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna says, "Everything that is experienced is but an expansion of my energy." Everything is sustained by him, but that does not mean that he is in everything. Sense perceptions, such as oral perception of the sound of a drum, visual perception of a beautiful woman, or perception of the delicious taste of a milk preparation by the tongue, all come through different senses and are therefore differently understood. Therefore, sensory knowledge is divided into different categories, although actually everything is one as a manifestation of the energy of the Supreme Lord. Similarly, the energies of fire and heat are Similarly, the energies of fire are heat and illumination. And by these two energies, fire can display itself in many varieties, or in diversified sense perception. Mayavadi philosophers declare this diversity to be false, but Vaishnava philosophers do not accept the different manifestations as false. They accept them as non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are a display of his diverse energies. The philosophy that the Absolute is true and this creation is false, Brahman Satyam Jagam Mithya, is not accepted by Vaishnava philosophers. The example is given that although all the glitters is not gold, this does not mean that a glittering object is false. For example, an oyster shell appears to be golden. This appearance of golden hue is due only to the perception of the eyes, but that does not mean that the oyster shell is false. Similarly, by seeing the form of Lord Krishna, one cannot understand what he actually is, but this does not mean that he is false. The form of Krishna has to be understood as it is described in the books of knowledge such as Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. By our imperfect sense perception, we cannot understand the form of the Lord. We have to acquire knowledge about him. Therefore, it is said here, Jnanam Ekam. Bhagavad Gita confirms that they are fools who, simply upon seeing Krishna, consider him a common man. They do not know the unlimited knowledge, power, and opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material sense speculation leads to the conclusion that the Supreme is formless. It is because of such mental speculation that the conditioned soul remains in ignorance, under the spell of illusory energy. The Supreme Person has to be understood by the transcendental sound vibrated by him in Bhagavad Gita, wherein he says that there is nothing superior to himself. The impersonal Brahman effulgence is resting on his personality. The purified absolute vision of Bhagavad Gita is compared to the river Ganges. Ganges water is so pure that it can purify even the asses and cows. But anyone who, disregarding the pure Ganges, wishes to be purified instead by the filthy water flowing in the drain cannot be successful. Similarly, one can successfully attain pure knowledge of the Absolute only by hearing from the pure Absolute himself. In this verse, it is clearly said that those who are averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead speculate with their imperfect senses about the nature of the Absolute Truth. The formless Brahman conception, however, can be received only by oral reception and not by personal experience. Knowledge is therefore acquired by oral reception. It is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra, Shastra Yonitvat. One has to inquire pure knowledge from the authorized scriptures. So-called speculative arguments about the absolute truth are therefore useless. The actual identity of the living entity is his consciousness, which is always present while the living entity is awake, dreaming, or in deep sleep. Even in deep sleep, he can perceive by consciousness whether he is happy or distressed. Thus, when consciousness is displayed through the medium of the subtle and gross material bodies, it is covered. But when the consciousness is purified in Krishna consciousness, one becomes free from the entanglement of repeated birth and death. When uncontaminated pure knowledge is uncovered from the modes of material nature, the actual identity of the living entity is discovered. He is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The process of uncovering is like this. The rays of the sunshine are luminous, and the sun itself is also luminous. In the presence of the sun, the rays illuminate just like the sun. But when the sunshine is covered by the spell of a cloud, or by Maya, then darkness, the imperfection of perception, begins. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of the spell of nescience, one has to awaken his spiritual consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, in terms of the authorized scriptures. Yata mahan ahang rupas trivrit pancha vidasvarat ekadasha vidastasya vapurandam jagadyata. From the total energy, the Mahat Tattva, I have manifested the false ego, the three modes of material nature, the 5 material elements, the individual consciousness, the 11 senses, and the material body. Similarly, the entire universe has come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The Supreme Lord is described as Mahatpada, which means that the total material energy known as the Mahat Tattva is lying at his lotus feet. The origin, or the total energy of the cosmic manifestation, is the Mahat Tattva. From the Mahat Tattva, all the other 24 divisions have sprung, namely the 11 senses, including the mind, the 5 sense objects, the 5 material elements, and then consciousness, intelligence, and false ego. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the Mahat Tattva, and therefore, in one sense, because everything is an emanation from the Supreme Lord, there is no difference between the Lord and the cosmic manifestation. But at the same time, the cosmic manifestation is different from the Lord. The word Swarat is very significant here. Swarat means independent. The Supreme Lord is independent, and the individual soul is also independent. Although there is no comparison between the two qualities of independence, the living entity is minutely independent, and the Supreme Lord is fully independent. As the individual soul has a material body made of 5 elements in the senses, the Supreme Independent Lord similarly has the gigantic body of the universe. The individual body is temporary. Similarly, the entire universe, which is considered to be the body of the Supreme Lord, is also temporary, and both the individual and universal bodies are products of the Mahat Tattva. One has to understand the differences with intelligence. Everyone knows that his material body has developed from a spiritual spark, and similarly, the universal body has developed from the supreme spark, the Supersoul. As the individual body develops from the individual soul, the gigantic body of the universe develops from the Supreme Soul. Just as the individual soul has consciousness, the Supreme Soul is also conscious. But although there is similarity between the consciousness of the Supreme Soul and the consciousness of the individual soul, the individual soul's consciousness is limited, whereas the consciousness of the Supreme Soul is unlimited. This is described in Bhagavad Gita 13.3. Kshetragyam chapimam vedhi. The supersoul is present in every field of activity, just as the individual soul is present in the individual body. Both of them are conscious. The difference is that the individual soul is conscious of the individual body only, whereas the supersoul is conscious of the total number of individual bodies. Yeah. The soul is only conscious of the body that he is in. But the Supreme Soul is conscious of everything. Just seeing if there are comments. Oh, it froze. Okay. Thanks for these notes, Vijay. I just got a message. Okay. Etarvaishadaya bhaktya yogabhyasena nityasha samāhitātmani sango viraktya paripashyati. This perfect knowledge can be achieved by a person who is already engaged in devotional service with faith, steadiness, and full detachment, and who is always absorbed in thought of the Supreme. He is aloof from material association. Purport. The atheistic mystic practitioner of yoga cannot understand this perfect knowledge. Only persons who engage in the practical activities of devotional service in full Krishna consciousness can become absorbed in full samadhi. It is possible for them to see and understand the actual fact of the entire cosmic manifestation and its cause. It is clearly stated here that this is not possible to understand for one who has not developed devotional service in full faith. The words samāhitātma and samadhi are synonymous. Etetat katitam gurvi jnanam tar brahma darshanam yena anubhudate tattvam prakrite purushasya cha. My dear respectful mother, I have already described the path of understanding the absolute truth, by which one can come to understand the real truth of matter and spirit and their relationship. Jnana yogascha manishto nairgunyo bhakti lakshana dvayorabhyeka evarto bhagavat shabda lakshana. Philosophical research culminates in understanding the Supreme Personality of God. After achieving this understanding, when one becomes free from the material modes of nature, he attains the stage of devotional service. Either by devotional service directly or by philosophical research, one has to find the same destination, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that after many, many lives of philosophical research, the wise man ultimately comes to the point of knowing that Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is everything, and therefore he surrenders unto him. Such serious students in philosophical research are rare because they are very great souls. If by philosophical research one cannot come to the point of understanding the Supreme Person, then his task is not finished. His search in knowledge is still to be continued until he comes to the point of understanding the Supreme Lord in devotional service. The opportunity for direct touch with the personality of Godhead is given in Bhagavad Gita, where it is also said that those who take other processes, namely the processes of philosophical speculation and mystic yoga practice, have much trouble. After many, many years of much trouble, a yogi or wise philosopher may come to him, but his path is very troublesome, whereas the path of devotional service is easy for everyone. One can achieve the results of wise philosophical speculation simply by discharging devotional service. And unless one reaches the point of understanding the personality of Godhead by his mental speculation, all his research work is said to be simply a labor of love. Or labor, useless labor, right? Yeah, okay. The ultimate destination of the wise philosopher is to merge in the impersonal Brahman. But that Brahman is the effulgence of the Supreme Person. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 14:27, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyayasya cha. Sorry. I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is indestructible and supreme bliss. This is one of the chapter shloki of Bhagavad Gita. I should know that verse. The Lord is the supreme reservoir of all pleasure, including Brahman pleasure. Therefore, one who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead is said to be already realized in impersonal Brahman and Paramatma. Yatendriyaya pratagdvairar artobahu gunashraya ekonanyate tavad Bhagavān shashtavartmibhi. A single object is appreciated differently by different senses due to its having different qualities. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one, but according to different scriptural injunctions, he appears to be different. Purport. It appears that by following the path of Jnana Yoga, or empiric philosophical speculation, one reaches the impersonal Brahman, whereas by executing devotional service in Krishna consciousness, one enriches his faith in and devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated here that both Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga are meant for reaching the same destination, the Personality of Godhead. By the process of Jnana Yoga, the same Personality of Godhead appears to be impersonal, as the same object appears to be different when perceived by different senses. The same Supreme Lord appears to be personal by mental speculation. A hill appears cloudy from a distance, and one who does not know may speculate that the hill is a cloud. Actually, it is not a cloud, it is a big hill. One has to learn from the authority that the sight of a cloud is not actually a cloud, but a hill. If one makes a little more progress, then instead of a cloud, he sees the hill and something green. When one actually approaches the hill, he'll see many varieties. Another example is in perceiving milk. When we see milk, we see that it is white. When we taste it, it appears that the milk is very palatable. When we touch milk, it appears very cold. When we smell milk, it appears to have a very good flavor. And when we hear, we understand that it is called milk. Perceiving milk with different senses, we say that something is white, something is very delicious, something very aromatic, and so on. Actually, it is milk. Similarly, those who are trying to find the Supreme Godhead by mental speculation may approach the bodily effulgence, or impersonal Brahman. And those who are trying to find the Supreme Godhead by yoga practice may find him as a localized supersoul. But those who are directly trying to approach the Supreme Truth by practice of Bhakti Yoga can see him face to face as the Supreme Person. Ultimately, the Supreme Person is a destination for all different processes. The fortunate who, by following the principles of scriptures, becomes completely purified of all material contamination, surrenders unto the Supreme Lord as everything. Just as one can appreciate the real taste of milk with the tongue and not with the eyes, nostrils, or ears, one can similarly appreciate the absolute truth perfectly with all relishable pleasure only through one path, devotional service. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Bhaktyamam abhijanati. If one wants to understand the absolute truth and perfection, he must take to devotional service. Of course, no one can understand the absolute truth in all perfection. That is not possible for the infinitesimal living entities. But the highest point of understanding by the living entity is reached by the discharge of devotional service and not otherwise. By following various scriptural paths, one may come to the impersonal effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The transcendental pleasure derived from merging with or understanding the impersonal Brahman is very extensive because Brahman is Ananta. Tad Brahman Nishkalam Anantam. Brahmananda is unlimited. But that unlimited pleasure can also be surpassed. That is the nature of the transcendence. The unlimited can be surpassed also, and that higher platform is Krishna. When one deals directly with Krishna, the mellow and the humor relished by reciprocation of devotional service is incomparable, even with the pleasure derived from transcendental Brahman. Prabodhananda Saraswati therefore says Kaivalya, that Brahman pleasure, is undoubtedly very great and is appreciated by many philosophers. But to a devotee who has understood how to derive pleasure from exchanging devotional service to the Lord, this unlimited Brahman appears to be hellish. One should try, therefore, to transcend even the Brahman pleasure in order to approach the position of dealing with Krishna face to face. As the mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, Krishna is called the master of the senses, Hrishikesh. The process is to fix the mind on Hrishikesh, or Krishna, as Ambarish did, Savai Mana Krishna, Padara Vindayo. Bhakti is the basic principle of all processes. Without bhakti, neither Gyan Yoga nor Ashtanga Yoga can be successful. And unless one approaches Krishna, the principles of self-realization have no ultimate destination. Okay, looks like there are lines missing. So let me just pull this up. 34 to 36. Database. 32. Priyaya kratuvyardhanai stapasvadhyayamarsanai atmendriya jayenapi sanyasena chakarmanam yogena vividangena bhakti yogena chaivahi dharmeno bhayachinnena ya pravritti nivrittiman आत्मतत्त्वावबोधेन वैराग्येन दृढेन च ईयते भगवान् एभिः सगुणो निर्गुणो स्वदृक्. By performing fruitive activities and sacrifices, by distributing charity, by performing austerities, by studying various literatures, by conducting philosophical research, by controlling the mind, by subduing the senses, by accepting the renounced order of life, and by performing the prescribed duties of one's social order. Oh my God, I just need to see what the end is. Okay. Sorry, I needed a sneak peek. By performing the different divisions of yoga practice, by performing devotional service, and by exhibiting the process of devotional service containing the symptoms of both attachment and detachment, by understanding the signs of self-realization, and by developing a strong sense of detachment. One who is expert in understanding the different processes of self-realization realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is represented in the material world as well as in transcendence. I think that's the longest sentence we've read yet. Okay, sorry, I just needed to. Purport. As stated in the previous verse, one has to follow the principles of the scriptures. There are different prescribed duties for persons in the different social and spiritual orders. It is stated that performance of fruitive activities and sacrifices and distribution of charity are activities meant for persons who are in the householder order of society. There are 4 orders of the social system: brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. For the grahasthas or householders, performance of sacrifice, distribution of charity, and action according to the prescribed duties are especially recommended. Similarly, austerity, study of Vedic literature, and philosophical research are meant for the vanaprasthas, or retired persons. Study of the Vedic literature from a bona fide spiritual master is meant for the brahmachari, or student. Atmendriya Jaya, control of the mind and taming the senses, is meant for persons in the renounced order of life, sannyas. All these different activities are prescribed for different persons so that they may be elevated to the platform of self-realization and from there to Krishna consciousness, devotional service. The words Bhakti Yogena Chaivahi mean that whatever is to be performed, as described in verse 34, whether yoga or sacrifice or fruit of activity or study of Vedic literature or philosophical research or acceptance of the renounced order of life, is to be executed in bhakti yoga. The word chaivahi, according to Sanskrit grammar, indicate that one must perform all these activities mixed with devotional service. Otherwise, such activities will not produce any fruit. Any prescribed activity must be performed for the sake of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:27, Yad karoshi, yad ashnashi. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you sacrifice, whatever austerities you undergo, and whatever charities you give, the result should be given to the Supreme Lord. The word eva is added, indicating that one must execute activities in such a way. Unless one adds devotional service to all activities, he cannot achieve the desired result. But when bhakti yoga is prominent in every activity, then the ultimate goal is sure. One has to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as it is stated in Bhagavad Gita. After many, many births, one approaches the Supreme Person, Krishna, and surrenders unto him, knowing that he is everything. Also in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Bhoktaram yagatapasam. For anyone who is undergoing rigid austerity, or for anyone performing different kinds of sacrifices, the beneficiary is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the proprietor of all planets, and he is the friend of every living soul. The words dharmeno bhayachinena mean that the bhakti yoga process contains 2 symptoms, namely attachment for the Supreme Lord and detachment from all material affinities. There are 2 symptoms of advancement in the knowledge in the process of devotional service, just as there are 2 processes taking place while eating. A hungry man feels strength and satisfaction from eating, and at the same time, he gradually becomes detached from eating anymore. Similarly, with the execution of devotional service, real knowledge develops, and one becomes detached from all material activities. In no other activity but devotional service is there such detachment from matter and attachment for the Supreme. There are 9 different processes to increase this attachment to the Supreme Lord: hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping, serving the Lord, making friendship, praying, offering everything, and serving the lotus feet of the Lord. The processes for increasing detachment from material affinities are explained in verse 36. One can achieve elevation to the higher planetary systems, like the heavenly kingdom, by executing one's prescribed duties and by performing sacrifices. When one is transcendental to such desires because of accepting the renounced order of life, he can understand the Brahman feature of the Supreme. And when one is able to see his real constitutional position, he sees all other processes and becomes situated in the stage of pure devotional service. At that time, he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavān. Understanding of the Supreme Person is called Atma Tattva Avabodhena, which means understanding of one's real constitutional position. If one actually understands one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, he becomes detached from the service of the material world. Everyone engages in some sort of service. If one does not know one's constitutional position, one engages in the service of his personal gross body or his family, society, or country. But as soon as one is able to see his constitutional position, the word sarvadrik means one who is able to see, he becomes detached from such material service and engages himself in devotional service. As long as one is in the modes of material nature and is performing the duties prescribed in the scriptures, he can be elevated to higher planetary systems, where the predominating deities are material representations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like the Sun God, the Moon God, the Air God, Brahma, and Lord Shiva. All the different demigods are material representations of the Supreme Lord. By material activities, one can approach only such demigods, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Yanti Deva Varta Devan. Those who are attached to the demigods and who perform the prescribed duties can approach the abodes of the demigods. In this way, one can go to the planet of the Pitas, or forefathers. Similarly, one who fully understands the real position of his life adopts devotional service and realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Let me check the comments. I've been looked for a little while. Great. Thanks, Pajum Babu. Okay. Pravocham bhakti yogasya swarupam te chaturvidam kalasya cha vyakta gater yantar dhavati jantushu. My dear mother, I have explained to you the process of devotional service and its identity in 4 different social divisions. I've explained to you as well how eternal time is chasing the living entities, although it is imperceptible to them. Purport. The process of bhakti yoga, devotional service, is the main river flowing down towards the sea of the absolute truth, and all other processes mentioned are just like tributaries. Lord Kapila is summarizing the importance of the process of devotional service. Bhakti yoga, as described before, is divided into 4 divisions, 3 in the material modes of nature and 1 in transcendence, which is untinged by the modes of material nature. Devotional service mixed with the 3 modes of material nature is a means for material existence, whereas devotional service without desires for fruitive results and without attempts for empirical philosophical research is pure transcendental devotional service. What are the ones in the modes of material nature? Sorry, I can't think right now. Karma Mishra Bhakti, Gyan Mishra Bhakti. No. Alright. Arup Siddha Bhakti, Sangha Siddha Bhakti. That's Arup Siddha Bhakti? No, it's 4. Bhakti Bimba Bhakti, Abbas Bhakti. Whatever. Jivasya Sangsriter Bhavir Avidya Karma Nirvita Yasvanga Pravishan Atma Naveda Gatamatmana. There are varieties of material existence for the living entity according to the work he performs in ignorance or forgetfulness of his real identity. My dear mother, if anyone enters into that forgetfulness, he is unable to understand where his movements will end. Purport. Once one enters into the continuation of material existence, it is very difficult to get out. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes himself or sends his bona fide representative, and he leaves behind scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, so that the living entities hovering in the darkness of nescience may take advantage of the instructions, the saintly persons and the spiritual masters, and thus be freed. Unless the living entity receives the mercy of the saintly persons, the spiritual unless the living entity receives the mercy of the saintly persons, the spiritual master, or Krishna, it is not possible for him to get out of the darkness of material existence. By his own endeavor, it is just not possible. Naitat kalayopadishen navinitaya karhichit nastabdhaya nabhinaya naiva dharma tvajaya cha. Lord Kapila continued, this instruction is not meant for the envious, for the agnostics, or for persons who are unclean in their behavior, nor is it for hypocrites, or for persons who are proud of material possessions. Na lalupayutpadishin, na griharudachetase, na bhaktaya chame jato, na mar bhakta dishamapi. It is not to be instructed to persons who are too greedy and too attached to family life, nor to persons who are non-devotees and who are envious of the devotees and of the personality of God. Purport. Persons who are always planning to do harm to other living entities are not eligible to understand Krishna consciousness and cannot enter into the realm of transcendental loving service to the Lord. Also, there are so-called disciples who become submissive to a spiritual master most artificially, with an ulterior motive. They also cannot understand what Krishna consciousness or devotional service is. Persons who, due to being initiated by another sector of religious faith, do not find devotional service as the common platform for approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, also cannot understand Krishna consciousness. We have experienced that some students come to join us, but because of being biased to some particular type of faith, they leave our camp and become lost in the wilderness. Actually, Krishna consciousness is not a sectarian religious faith. It is a teaching process for understanding the Supreme Lord and our relationship with Him. Anyone can join this movement without prejudice, but unfortunately, there are persons who feel differently. It is better, therefore, not to instruct the science of Krishna consciousness to such persons. Gradually, materialistic persons, after some name, fame, and material gain, generally, material persons are after some name, fame, and material gain. So if someone takes to Krishna consciousness for these reasons, he will never be able to understand this philosophy. Such persons take to religious principles as a social declaration. They admit themselves into some cultural institution for the sake of name only, especially in this age. Such persons also cannot understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Even if one is not greedy for material possessions, but is too attached to family life, he also cannot understand Krishna consciousness. Superficially, such persons are not very greedy for material possessions, but they are too attached to wife, children, and family improvement. When a person is not contaminated by the above-mentioned faults, yet at the ultimate issue is not interested in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or if he is a non-devotee, he also cannot understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Oh, I think this is a very common verse also. Yeah, I recognize. Shraddhadanaya bhaktaya vinitaya nasuyate bhuteshu kritamaitraya shushushabhirataya cha. Yeah, I've seen this verse. Instruction should be given to the faithful devotee who is respectful to the spiritual master, non-envious, friendly to all kinds of living entities, and eager to render service with faith and sincerity. Instruction should be given to those people. They're respectful to the spiritual master, non-envious, friendly to all kinds of living entities, and eager to render service with faith and sincerity. Bahirjata viragaya shanta chittaya tiyatam nirmatsaraya shuchaye yasyaham prayasam priya. How many verses are there in this chapter? 43. This instruction should be imparted by the spiritual master to persons who have taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be more dear than anything, who are not envious of anyone, who are perfectly cleansed, and who have developed detachment for that which is outside the purview of Krishna consciousness. Should we just finish this chapter because there's only 2 verses left? Yeah, we're almost finished. This verse doesn't even have a purport. So I'm going to just finish this off even though it's already 8. Purport. In the beginning, no one can be elevated to the highest stage of devotional service. Here, bhakta means one who does not hesitate to accept the reformatory processes for becoming a bhakta. In order to become a devotee of the Lord, one has to accept a spiritual master and inquire from him about how to progress in devotional service. To serve a devotee, to chant the holy name according to a certain counting method, to worship the deity, to hear Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam or Bhagavad Gita from a realized person, and to live in a sacred place where devotional service is not disturbed are the first out of the 64 devotional activities for making progress in devotional service. One who has accepted these 5 chief activities is called a devotee. It's Nam Kirtan, what is it? Sadhu Sangha Nam Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan Aturavas Shri Murtira Shraddhaya Sevan. One who has accepted these 5 chief activities is called a devotee. One must be prepared to offer the necessary respect and honor to the spiritual master. He should not be unnecessarily envious of his god brothers. Rather, if a god brother is more enlightened and advanced in Krishna consciousness, one should accept him as almost equal to the spiritual master, and one should be happy to see such god brothers advance in Krishna consciousness. A devotee should always be very kind to the general public in instructing Krishna consciousness, because that is the only situation for getting out of the clutches of Maya. That is really humanitarian work, for it is the way to show mercy to other people who need it very badly. The word Shushusha indicates a person who faithfully engages in serving the spiritual master. One should give up personal service and all kinds of comforts to the spiritual master. A devotee who does so is also a bona fide candidate for taking this instruction. The word Bahir Jata Vairagya means a person who has developed attachment. The word Bahir Jati Vairagya means a person who has developed detachment from external and internal material propensities. Not only is he detached from activities which are not connected to Krishna consciousness, but he should be internally averse to the material way of life. Such a person must be non-envious and should think of the welfare of all living entities, not only of the human beings, but living entities other than human beings. The word Shuchaye means one who is cleansed both externally and internally. To become actually cleansed externally and internally, one should chant the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, or Vishnu, constantly. The word Dhyātam means that knowledge of Krishna consciousness should be offered by the spiritual master. The spiritual master must not accept a disciple who is not qualified. He should not be professional and should not accept disciples for monetary gains. The bona fide spiritual master must see the bona fide qualities of a person whom he is going to initiate. An unworthy person should not be initiated. The spiritual master should train his disciple in such a way so that in the future only, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will be the dearmost goal of his life. In these two verses, the qualities of a devotee are fully explained. One who has actually developed all the qualities listed in these verses is already elevated to the post of a devotee. If one has not developed all these qualities, he still has to fulfill these conditions in order to become a perfect devotee. Ya idang shinuyad amba shraddhaya purusha sakrit yo vabhidhattima sahirti padavim chame. Anyone who once meditates upon me with faith and affection, who hears and chants about me, surely goes back home, back to Godhead. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 32nd chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled Entanglement and Fruitive Activities. All right, so tomorrow we will begin the very last chapter of the third canto. All right, we only went over 5 minutes. That's not too bad. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur Hare Bol. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai, Nitil Vishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Shishimad, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai, Nitil Vishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Shishimad, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitil Vishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Shishimad, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Shishmad Srila Bhakti Bhagavān Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shata Shishmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Vishnu Mahabhagavat Srila Gokishwaras Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Vishnu Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath Shara Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Braja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Bharata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Anantapati Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantharaj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Shnitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Paradevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams. Oh, and there are not so many, there's 11,000 words in the last chapter. So that's not actually so long. We can finish it in 2 days, which is good. We'll finish it by the 19th. It will be completed. All right. Until next time, Hari Bol.